My name is Margaret Elizabeth Hartwell, and at 56, I thought my career was over. I had given 32 years of my life to Harrison and Associates, a mid-sized marketing firm in downtown Chicago. I started there as a junior account coordinator fresh out of college, worked my way up through sheer determination and countless late nights, and eventually became their senior client relations manager. I knew every client's preference, every account's history, every nuance of what made our business tick. But apparently, that wasn't enough anymore. The meeting that changed everything happened on a Tuesday morning in March. I remember because it was unusually warm for the season and I had worn my favorite navy suit, the one that always made me feel confident and capable. I was called into the conference room by James Harrison Jr., the founder's son who had taken over the company 5 years earlier when his father retired. "Margaret," he said, not even looking up from his laptop as I entered. "Please, have a seat." I settled into the familiar leather chair, the same one I'd occupied during countless client meetings and strategy sessions. The room felt different that day, sterile and cold, despite the warm sunlight streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows. "I'll get straight to the point," James continued, finally closing his laptop and meeting my eyes. "We've been reviewing our client acquisition numbers, and frankly, they're not where we need them to be." I nodded, expecting to discuss new strategies or marketing approaches. After all, I had been instrumental in developing most of our current client retention programs. The younger demographic is becoming increasingly important to our target market, he said, his words carefully measured. Our research shows that clients, especially in the tech and lifestyle sectors, prefer to work with account managers who they can relate to on a cultural level. A cold knot began forming in my stomach. I had heard this conversation before, not directed at me, but whispered in break rooms and implied in hiring decisions. I just never thought it would apply to me. "What are you saying, James?" I asked, though I already knew. "I'm saying we need fresh blood, Margaret. Young energy. People who understand social media trends, who can connect with millennial entrepreneurs, who can speak their language." He paused, and I could see the discomfort in his eyes. "Your experience is invaluable, don't get me wrong. But we need team members who can attract new clients. And frankly, you're not what these young CEOs are looking for when they walk into our office." The words hit me like a physical blow. 32 years of dedication, of building relationships, of growing this company from a small firm to a regional powerhouse. And suddenly, I was too old to be valuable, too old to attract clients, too old to matter. "This is about my age," I said quietly. "This is about business." He replied, but his tone suggested he knew exactly what it was about. "We're offering you a generous severance package, 6-month salary, continuation of health benefits, and a glowing reference letter." I sat there in stunned silence for what felt like an eternity. The room seemed to shrink around me, the walls pressing in with the weight of rejection and discrimination, masked as business strategy. "I need some time to think," I managed to say. "Of course. Take the rest of the day. But Margaret..." He opened his laptop again, already moving on to the next item on his agenda. "We'll need your decision by tomorrow morning." I walked out of that conference room feeling like a ghost. 32 years of my life, reduced to a liability because of the year I was born. I gathered my personal belongings, the photo of my late husband Robert, the small plant I'd kept on my desk since 1995, the coffee mug my daughter had given me that read, "World's Best Mom," and left the building for what I thought would be the last time. The months that followed were the darkest of my life. Robert had passed away 3 years earlier, and without the structure and purpose of work, I felt utterly lost. My savings were substantial thanks to years of careful planning, But money couldn't fill the void left by a career that had defined me for over 3 decades. I spent my days in a haze of daytime television and half-hearted job applications. Every interview felt like a reminder of what James had said. I was too old, too out of touch, too irrelevant for the modern business world. Younger candidates with half my experience were chosen for positions I could have done, blindfolded. Depression crept in slowly, like fog rolling over a lake. Some days I didn't bother getting dressed. I stopped returning calls from former colleagues who reached out with sympathy and concern. I felt like I was becoming invisible, fading away into irrelevance. It was my daughter, Sarah, who finally shook me out of my despair. She drove up from Indianapolis one weekend, took one look at me in my bathrobe at 2 p.m, and staged what she called an intervention. "Mom, this isn't you," she said, pulling open the curtains and flooding my living room with afternoon sunlight. "The woman who raised me never gave up on anything. Ever. I'm not giving up," I protested weakly. "I'm just adjusting." "Adjusting to what? To being written off? To accepting that your worth is determined by your birth year?" She sat beside me on the couch, her voice gentle but firm. "You taught me that when someone underestimates you, you prove them wrong. What happened to that woman?" Sarah stayed the entire weekend, and by Sunday evening something had shifted inside me. She was right. I had always been a fighter, someone who turned obstacles into opportunities. Maybe it was time to remember who I really was. The idea came to me slowly over the following weeks. If I couldn't find a place in the existing marketing world, why not create my own? I began researching the industry, looking for gaps and opportunities that others might have missed. What I found surprised me. While everyone was focused on courting young tech-savvy clients, there was an entire demographic being overlooked. Successful, established businesses run by people my age or older. Companies that valued experience, relationship building, and old-fashioned service over flashy social media campaigns and trendy marketing gimmicks. I started small, reaching out to former contacts and offering freelance consulting services. My first client was Patricia Montgomery, who owned a chain of boutique hotels. She was 63 and had been frustrated with her previous marketing firm's focus on targeting millennials while ignoring the affluent baby boomers who actually had the discretionary income to afford luxury travel. "Margaret, you understand my customers because you are my customers," she said during our first meeting. "These young marketing executives keep talking about Instagram influencers and TikTok campaigns, but my guests aren't on TikTok. They're reading travel magazines and planning trips based on personal recommendations." Working with Patricia was like coming back to life. I created a comprehensive marketing strategy that focused on traditional media, relationship building, and the kind of personalized service that had made me successful at Harrison & Associates. Within 6 months, her hotel occupancy rates had increased by 30%. Word spread quickly through the network of established business owners who had been feeling overlooked by the youth-obsessed marketing industry. Soon I had more clients than I could handle as a solo consultant. I was working with luxury car dealerships, high-end restaurants, financial planning firms, and established professional services companies. All businesses that catered to clients who valued experience and expertise over the latest trends. By the end of my first year of freelancing, I had earned more than I had in my final year at Harrison & Associates. But more importantly, I had found my confidence again. I was no longer the discarded 56-year-old who wasn't young enough to attract clients. I was Margaret Hartwell, master of relationship-based marketing, and I was building something significant. The irony wasn't lost on me when I started receiving calls from other marketing professionals who had been pushed aside by the industry's obsession with youth. There was Robert Chen, a 59-year-old creative director who had been restructured out of his position at a major agency. There was Linda Rodriguez, a 52-year-old account manager who had been told she needed to modernize her approach or find a new career. There was David Thompson, a 60-year-old media buyer who had been replaced by someone half his age with 1/10 his experience. One by one, I brought them into my growing consulting practice. We called ourselves the Wisdom Collective, a name that would have been considered career suicide in the youth-obsessed marketing world, but which resonated perfectly with our target demographic. We weren't trying to be young. We were leveraging our experience, our relationships, and our deep understanding of what it meant to serve clients who valued substance over style. We were building a business that celebrated expertise rather than treating it as a liability. The collective grew rapidly. Within 2 years, we had 15 consultants and were handling major accounts across the Midwest. We had moved from my home office to a beautiful space in a restored historic building downtown, the kind of environment that impressed our sophisticated clientele far more than the sterile glass towers favored by the trendier agencies. But it wasn't just about the money or the success. It was about proving that experience has value, that relationships matter, that there's wisdom in understanding your market rather than just chasing the latest fad. Every client we served, every campaign we created, every relationship we built was evidence that we hadn't been too old to succeed. We had been too valuable to waste. The real vindication came during my 3rd year of running the Wisdom Collective. I was in my office reviewing proposals for a major campaign when my assistant knocked on my door. "Margaret, there's someone here to see you," she said, her voice carrying a note of curiosity. "James Harrison, Jr. from Harrison & Associates. He says he doesn't have an appointment, but he was hoping you might have a few minutes." I felt a rush of emotions: anger, satisfaction, curiosity. I had heard through the grapevine that Harrison & Associates had been struggling. Several of their major clients had left, and there were rumors of financial difficulties. But I had been too busy building my own success to pay much attention to their problems. "Send him in," I said, straightening my jacket and preparing myself for whatever this encounter might bring. James entered my office looking nothing like the confident executive who had dismissed me 3 years earlier. His hair was grayer, his suit slightly wrinkled, and there were lines around his eyes that suggested sleepless nights and mounting stress. "Margaret," he said, extending his hand. "Thank you for seeing me. I know this is unusual. Please, sit down," I replied, gesturing to the chairs in front of my desk. "What brings you here, James?" He sat down heavily, and I could see him taking in my office, the awards on the wall, the photos with satisfied clients, the view of the city through my windows. This was not the desperate, discarded employee he had expected to find. "I'll be direct," he said, echoing the words he had used in that conference room 3 years earlier. "Harrison & Associates is in trouble. We've lost several major clients, and our new business development has been challenging." I waited, saying nothing. "I've been tracking your success with the Wisdom Collective," he continued. "Your client list is impressive. Your reputation in the industry is growing. And frankly, you're working with exactly the kind of established, high-value clients that we should have been courting all along. Is that so?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. "Margaret, I made a mistake. A significant mistake. When I let you go, I was thinking about demographics and market trends, but I wasn't thinking about the fundamentals of our business. I wasn't thinking about relationships, about trust, about the kind of deep client service that you had always provided." He paused, and I could see him struggling with words that clearly didn't come easily. "I was wrong," he said finally. "And I'm here to ask if you might consider coming back. Not as an employee, but as a partner. I want to offer you an equity stake in Harrison and Associates. I want to rebuild the company around the approach you've perfected with the Wisdom Collective. I leaned back in my chair, processing this unexpected turn of events. 3 years ago, this man had crushed my spirit, had made me question my worth, had cast me aside like outdated equipment. Now he was sitting in my office, acknowledging his mistake and asking for my help. "That's an interesting proposal, James," I said carefully. "But I have to ask, what makes you think I'd be interested in joining a company that considered me too old to attract clients? Because you've proven that age isn't a liability, it's an asset," he replied. "You've built something remarkable, something that fills a gap in the market that I was too short-sighted to see. I need that vision. The company needs that vision." I stood up and walked to my window, looking out at the city where I had spent so many years building my career. The irony of the situation was almost overwhelming. The company that had discarded me was now asking me to save it. "James, I appreciate your offer," I said, turning back to face him. "But I'm not interested in becoming a partner in Harrison and Associates." I could see the disappointment in his eyes, but I wasn't finished. "I'm interested in buying it," I continued. "Completely." The silence in the room was deafening. James stared at me as if I had just spoken in a foreign language. "Buying it?" he repeated. "From what I understand, the company is facing significant financial challenges. You need capital, you need new leadership, and you need a vision for the future. I can provide all three, but not as a partner. If I'm going to save Harrison and Associates, I'm going to do it as the owner." Over the following weeks, I had my lawyers and accountants examine Harrison and Associates' financial records. The situation was worse than I had imagined. The company that had once been profitable and growing was now carrying significant debt and losing money every month. The building that had once bustled with activity was half empty, with several floors sitting vacant. But I could see the potential. The company still had some valuable clients, a solid reputation in certain sectors, and infrastructure that could be repurposed. Most importantly, it had a name that was still respected in the industry. The negotiations took 2 months. James fought hard to maintain some ownership stake. But ultimately, the financial realities of the situation left him with limited options. The company needed a significant cash infusion to survive, and I was the only buyer willing to provide it. On a crisp October morning, I walked into the offices of Harrison and Associates as its new owner. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was entering the same conference room where I had been told I was too old to attract clients. But this time, I was sitting at the head of the table, as the person in charge. The staff meeting was awkward at first. Many of the employees remembered me from my years at the company, and they were clearly uncertain about what my ownership would mean for their futures. I could see the mixture of curiosity, concern, and hope in their faces. "I want to be clear about something," I began, looking around the table at faces both familiar and new. "I'm not here for revenge. I'm not here to settle old scores or to prove a point. I'm here because I see the potential in this company, and I believe that together we can build something remarkable." I outlined my vision for the new Harrison and Associates, a company that would serve clients across all demographics, but with a special focus on the established successful businesses that had been overlooked by the industry's youth obsession. We would combine the energy and digital skills of younger team members with the relationship-building expertise of more experienced professionals. "Experience is not a liability," I said, echoing the words that had driven me for the past 3 years. "It's a competitive advantage, and we're going to prove that in the marketplace." The transformation wasn't immediate. It took months to rebuild client relationships, to establish new business development strategies, and to create a company culture that valued experience and expertise. But slowly, steadily, the company began to turn around. We started winning back former clients who had been dissatisfied with their new agencies. We attracted new business from established companies that were tired of being treated as if they were outdated. We built a reputation as the agency that understood the full spectrum of the marketplace, not just the demographics that were considered trendy. One of the most satisfying moments came when Patricia Montgomery, my first client from the Wisdom Collective, called to congratulate me on the acquisition. "Margaret, you've done something remarkable," she said. "You've taken a company that dismissed you and turned it into exactly what the market needed. It's like watching someone not just get revenge, but get justice." She was right. This wasn't about revenge. It was about justice. It was about proving that experience, wisdom, and relationship-building skills are valuable assets, not liabilities to be discarded. It was about creating a business that recognized the worth of all professionals, regardless of their age. The success of the new Harrison & Associates exceeded even my most optimistic projections. Within 2 years of the acquisition, we had doubled our client base and tripled our revenue. We had moved back into the full building and were considering expansion into other markets. But perhaps the most meaningful success was the transformation of the company culture. We had become a place where experience was valued, where relationship building was prioritized, where the wisdom that comes with years of professional practice was seen as a strategic advantage. I kept James on as a senior account manager, not out of generosity, but because he had learned from his mistakes and had become a valuable team member. The dynamic between us was surreal at times. The man who had once told me I was too old to attract clients was now working for me, implementing strategies that proved exactly the opposite. "Margaret," he said to me one day, about 6 months after the acquisition, "I need to apologize again. Not just for letting you go, but for the way I did it, for making you feel like your years of service and expertise were worthless." "James," I replied, "the best apology is changed behavior, and you've certainly demonstrated that." As I sit in my office now, 5 years after that devastating meeting in this very building, I often reflect on the journey that brought me here. I think about the woman who walked out of these offices, feeling worthless and discarded, and I marvel at the transformation that took place. The marketing industry is beginning to recognize what I proved with the Wisdom Collective, and then with Harrison & Associates. That experience is valuable, that relationships matter, that there's wisdom in understanding your market deeply, rather than chasing every new trend. Other agencies are starting to hire back experienced professionals they had previously pushed aside. But it's not just about the business success. It's about the personal transformation that happened when I refused to accept someone else's definition of my worth. When I was told I was too old to attract clients, I could have accepted that verdict and faded into irrelevance. Instead, I chose to prove that age is not a barrier to success. It's a foundation for it. The phone rings, interrupting my reflections. My assistant informs me that there's a call from a potential client, a successful entrepreneur in her 50s who has been frustrated with her current marketing agency's focus on reaching younger demographics while ignoring her actual customer base. I smile as I take the call. This is exactly why I rebuilt my career and acquired this company. Not for revenge, but for justice. Not to prove that I'm not too old, but to prove that experience, wisdom, and relationship-building skills are exactly what the market needs. "This is Margaret Hartwell," I say into the phone. "How can I help you build your business?" The irony is perfect. The woman who was told she was too old to attract clients is now the CEO of a thriving marketing company. attracting clients precisely because of her age, her experience, and her deep understanding of what it means to serve businesses that value substance over style. Every day I walk into the same building where I was dismissed, but now I own it. I sit in the same conference room where I was told I was a liability, but now I'm the one making the decisions. I work with the same types of clients I was supposedly too old to attract, but now they seek me out specifically because of my experience and expertise. The young executives who once saw me as obsolete now work for me, learning from the very experience they once dismissed. The industry that once wrote me off now looks to my company as a model for how to serve the full spectrum of the marketplace. This is not a story about revenge. It's a story about resilience, about refusing to accept other people's limitations, about turning discrimination into opportunity. It's about proving that sometimes the people who underestimate you are giving you the greatest gift of all, the motivation to prove them wrong. When I was 56, I was told I was too old to attract clients. Today, at 61, I own the company that fired me, and those former colleagues who made that decision now work for me. They've learned what I always knew, that experience isn't a liability, it's an asset. And sometimes the best revenge is not just success, but the kind of success that changes the entire industry's perspective on what valuable really means. The woman who was dismissed for being too old to attract clients is now the CEO who attracts clients specifically because of her age, her wisdom, and her deep understanding of what it means to serve businesses that value experience over trends. And every day, in every client meeting, in every strategic decision, in every success story, I prove that their assessment was not just wrong, it was exactly backwards. This is my story. This is my proof. This is my victory. And this is why I walk into this building every morning, not as the woman who was dismissed, but as the woman who refused to be dismissed, and who built something remarkable in the process.